Are you passionate about the power of psychedelics and eager to deepen your personal and professional knowledge? We're pleased to announce that we're extending our deadline for vital applications to January 14th, 2024. This is your last opportunity to join our comprehensive 12-month training program until next year. Master the elements of psychedelics, connect with a global community of professionals, and experience our life-altering program today. Visit vitalpsychedelictraining.com to learn more and apply now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have Dave Kopilak and Kaci Hohmann from Emerge Law Group out of Oregon. It's a little bit of a short one, so I'm going to give you a little bit of news in this intro segment here as well. But Dave was the primary drafter of Oregon Ballot Measure 91 in 2014 and understands this is kind of reading from his site, understands the business, corporate, and securities law challenges that cannabis businesses face. That's a big deal. Yeah. Additionally, Dave was a primary drafter of Oregon Ballot Measure 109 in 2020, also known as the Oregon Psilocybin Services Act, which was approved by Oregon voters on November 3, 2020. Dave has been following the meetings of the Psilocybin Advisory Board and its various subcommittees and has unique insight into the numerous challenges that Oregon licensed businesses will face as the industry prepares to launch in 23. Yeah. So we also have Kaci Hohmann here. Kaci was a member of the drafting team for Oregon Measure 109, again, the Psilocybin Services Act there, which legalized psilocybin services in Oregon and serves as co-chair of Emerge's Law Group's psychedelics practice group. And yeah, there's a lot here. I had a great time recording with them at the Remind conference, and we get into a lot of detail around this whole, what does the law look like? What is actually available for us to be doing in Oregon, and how can you do it, and how can you do it with the most safety for everybody involved, from practitioners to investors to operators, stuff like that. So definitely, I think you'll enjoy this one if you're interested in Oregon. Before we jump into the interview, I'm going to read you a little bit of news. There's been some fun stuff in the last week. So been quite the eventful little period here. MAPS-related news. MAPS gets $100 million, I guess, psychedelic investment and rebrands to Lykos Therapeutics, Lykos. Some of you might remember Lykos, the search engine, little dog. Yeah, I'm sure there's some sort of Greek mythology here. But yeah, so Lykos was a ruler of the ancient city of ancient Thebes or Boeotia. So actually a ruler. It's quite interesting. It means kind of wolf, which is obviously a nod to Rick Doblin's wolf that was famously included in some stuff recently. So it looks like they're going to try to get some distance between MAPS proper, the nonprofit, and the benefit corp. And I think that makes sense. Like I saw a lot of critiques on socials, and I thought a lot of them were quite unfair. I think there's room for this, though. I think there's a lot of good MAPS can do once well funded from the benefit corp and separated from the benefit corp. Like MAPS certainly had to follow a certain set of rules to operate in the way it has been for ages as it's trying to bring drugs to market. So definitely a lot of benefit there. I wish them all well, and let's also watch closely and try to keep everybody honest if it starts to look a little weird. In other MAPS news, there's also this new REMS thing that's going on, the risk evaluation and mitigation strategies that the FDA is working on in partnership with the public and MAPS proper. And it's an interesting thing to have to go through this. Other drugs beyond MDMA that have this already would be codeine analogs, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, levorphanol, mepridine, morphine, oxycodone, oxymorphone, pentazocine, and tepanidol or tramadol. Yeah, so there's a lot of drugs here that are in this REMS protocol, but I don't super see how this is, why MDMA gets this special treatment. It's super safe relative to some of these other drugs here. So I don't know. Anyway, the debate right now around REMS is quite interesting. So it's looking like there could be some federal pressure if the FDA takes certain guidance to mandate therapy whenever psychotherapy, for instance, whenever there are psychedelics administered, and forcing everybody into a model that looks a lot more like MAPS. And then you take stakeholders in the psychedelic arena like cluster busters or the Psychedelic and Pain Association. Psychotherapy isn't necessary for all conditions. Psychotherapy is helpful for people for sure, but there's cases in which it isn't. And then there's also some stuff here around, do cluster busters has been working with people forever, to like over 20 years, to help them get access to federally scheduled compounds and use them without a therapist, and they get better. Like their cluster symptoms go away almost right away. So yeah, and there's the chronic pain stuff that's been underdeveloped. We're working on developing that. All of those scenarios look like they don't require psychotherapy. And then, think about folks who have gone through trauma from people in the psychiatric community, like somebody who is hospitalized. Like that person may or may not have experienced lots of trauma as part of their hospitalization. And will they trust clinicians again? I think there's room to figure out ways to do this stuff well without clinical people involved. Kind of a tenet of ours here at Psychedelics Today. It's why we've trained so many people that are not clinicians, also clinicians, plenty of them as well. But we've trained lots of non-clinicians, and we think that's super important. Kind of a peer-based approach as opposed to like, look how expert I am. Yeah. So the REMS thing, Cluster Busters and Psychedelics and Pain Association are definitely going to leave some more comments and try to work with the FDA to say, hey, like, we don't want to put down rules here in REMS that could restrict many people from having their suffering alleviated. So that could put, financial burdens and otherwise in front of it. So I heard recently too that there is a study on low back pain going on, I believe at Stanford, and the person wasn't allowed to move throughout the whole session. Quite interesting. Anyway, there's a lot of crazy rules that can happen here, and we need to like watch those so they don't get out of control. So expect more commentary and time on that. Some interesting news came out about a lovely molecule, ibogaine. This magnesium ibogaine therapy in veterans with traumatic brain injuries. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of hype, which is really cool, around magnesium potentially lowering the cardiac risk from ibogaine, which is really great. But further, this study is a lot more important than that. I believe this was out of Stanford as well, if I'm not mistaken. But it showed that effectively combat-induced traumatic brain injury responds incredibly well to ibogaine. In this case, the ibogaine magnesium combo. So it actually growing new white matter is what I was told by another doctor earlier today, which is great. And I'm just really hopeful for this. I think a lot of you know this. I experienced a pretty intense brain injury about 1 year ago today, as I'm recording this on the 10th here. And yeah, I'm now interested. How can I use this stuff? I'm using hyperbaric oxygen currently. I've done so much physical therapy, supplementation, and other work, but I'm not 100% back yet. But I wonder, could ibogaine help me out? And what's the right way to go about it? All that fun stuff comes up for me. So I'll report back on that. But check out this paper if you're interested. It was in Nature Medicine. Title again, Magnesium Ibogaine Therapy in Veterans with Traumatic Brain Injuries, published January 5, 2024. Yeah, check that one out. I'm from the little state of New Hampshire in the Northeast. Live free or die is our motto there. Title of this article here from the 10th Amendment Center. I wish I knew the 10th Amendment. New Hampshire bill would legalize several psychedelics for medical use despite federal prohibition. Yeah, I get this. So reading the article here for a moment. A bill filed in the New Hampshire House would legalize the use of psychedelics, including psilocybin and LSD, for medical use, setting the stage to nullify federal prohibition of the same in practice and effect. So this is House Bill 1693, HB 1693. It was introduced by Representative Kevin Verviller on December 15th. And it would effectively legalize psilocybin, LSD, and mescaline for medical purposes and set up a similar system to the state's medical cannabis program to administer medical psychedelics for patients with qualifying conditions. I'm always a little troubled when they say qualifying conditions, because that means that it's going to be really narrow in scope, which is, it's okay, I guess, in terms of let's get the ball rolling, but we don't want people excluded. And there's a lot of populations that could benefit from this stuff. So the proposed law would protect registered patients and their caretakers from arrest by state and local law enforcement, prosecution, and penalty under state or municipal law. The patient would require to meet the following criteria: 21 years of age or older, suffers from a condition in the list, possesses a valid registry ID card, and doesn't exceed 2 ounces of usable psychedelics or any unusable psychedelics. What does that mean? So funny stuff there is the idea of a caretaker in this. I wonder, because they're including LSD, does the caretaker mean somebody who is the chemist producing the LSD, or will the state take that on? I kind of have my doubts this will pass, but I like how ambitious it is. Other fun stuff here is 2 ounces. 2 ounces of LSD is quite a lot. 2 ounces of mescaline, pure mescaline, is quite a lot. 2 ounces of psilocybin, if we're talking just pure compound, extracted or otherwise, is quite a lot too. Active dose is like, somewhere between like 8 to 30 milligrams of psilocybin. So it's pretty crazy. Anyway, I'm happy to see this coming from New Hampshire. It's a good move. And if it passes, I'm going to be doing backflips. Yeah, I'll have to learn how to do those again. And I think there's a lot of benefit. Like New Hampshire is definitely a state affected by brain drain in a lot of ways. Like everybody moves away from home and doesn't go back. I'm one of those folks. I think if there's a way to help the populations that are left behind, it'd be really good. And there is also a lot of like people moving to New Hampshire from Massachusetts. So it's like also just changing the culture of the state in radical ways, which is really interesting to watch from far away. So I wonder if there's some interesting movement there and backwards flow where we could impact Massachusetts to maybe legalize LSD as well. In all this talk, like all this state level work, we never hear about LSD, which is crazy to me, but I guess people think it's politically expedient to only worry about plants. Yeah, so that's the New Hampshire story. Check that out, the 10th Amendment Center. Again, the title of the article: New Hampshire bill would legalize several psychedelics for medical use despite federal prohibition. And you'll see that Ibogaine story I was chatting about in other places as well, like Scientific American and elsewhere. Rachel Newer, who I think wrote the recent MDMA book, wrote this article for Scientific American. So it's going well. And then on January 4th, Kyle Yeager at Marijuana Moment published this one titled "DEA confirms that psychedelic mushroom spores are federally legal prior to germination," which would really, it's not germination. It's, oh, come on. 2 spores get together. There's some food there and they start colonizing. I know there's some other technical terms, but whatever. Germination is an appropriate term. The DEA finally said it was okay. So that's a big one. Yeah. So we can buy these things and sell them and they're not federally illegal. Yeah, it's a big one. Finally, George Clinton to be honored with the a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for psychedelic history, for psychedelic culture. This is a big deal. Clinton has been an amazing individual in the space. At one point, I saw more George Clinton shows than Fish shows, which is a pretty fun period of my life. Anyway, I think that's it for news. I hope you enjoy this episode and with Dave and Kaci, and we will see you on the other side. Thanks for tuning in. Bye. All right, so here we are with the Emerge Law Group. Is that right? Yeah, excited. So we have Dave Kopilak and Kaci. What's your last name? Hohmann. Great. Thank you both for being here. I'm excited. So we're at the Remind conference, and that's pretty interesting so far. I'm actually really enjoying the vibe and the people. And here we are podcasting. So let's dig in and learn a little bit about your law firm. So what do you guys focus in at Emerge?
Well, we're essentially a business law firm. We've been in the cannabis industry in Oregon, since the early days, back in the medical marijuana days. Adult use came along with a 2014 measure. We have been, helping out cannabis businesses for a long time. And then we've just sort of followed that into the psilocybin industry. And so, we had a ballot measure passed there in 2020. It's now 2023. This is the first year where businesses are up and running. We spent 2 years in kind of a rulemaking phase, but we were, following that along, and businesses folks started to plan their businesses, getting ready for the license applications. And so, we're sort of intimately familiar with how the whole Oregon rollout is happening. So it's very exciting. It's all, new, and it's a good diversion from cannabis. After being in cannabis for 7 or 8 years, it's a new and exciting thing.
Right. And Oregon had an interesting, complex ride with cannabis too. So, especially the last few years. And Kaci, can you talk a little bit about like your involvement in the firm and the psychedelic work you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. I'm a business attorney like Dave. And so, primarily what we do is represent businesses and forming their entities and figuring out how to structure their businesses from a tax perspective. Obviously, we're dealing with controlled substances. And so there's this really stingy IRS tax code called 280E that really affects, certain players in the market. And so, we're always trying to think about how to help mitigate tax implications for our clients. We do a lot of merger and acquisition work, and in general, we currently are just representing a lot of regulated businesses in Oregon. So service centers, facilitators, manufacturers. And then, of course, we also do some work with ketamine clinics and some foreign retreats and things like that.
Well, it's interesting. You have the foreign retreat stuff too, and ketamine. Like that's radically different from psilocybin, but super important work. So I guess for listeners, how do you describe what's happened in Oregon with this ballot measure?
Well, I mean, the ballot measure as a whole, I guess I'll just talk about it for a minute. I mean, it's in ways it's similar to cannabis, in other ways it's drastically different. So the clients, who are essentially the consumers, have to purchase the psilocybin products at a service center, and they have to consume them at the service center under the supervision of a facilitator. So that's the game. And so
facilitator, the language they're using?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be using the actual terminology. Facilitators are kind of your trip sitters who are guiding the clients through a session. So that there's a preparation session, which is a first session where it's just kind of an intake type thing, a bunch of legal documents, bunch of questionnaires and things like that. And then once that's over, the next step is usually the administration session, where that's the consumption session where everybody's on site at the service center. And so, the sessions can range in duration. On the one end of the scale, you can have microdose sessions. There can be group sessions. There can be outdoor sessions. There can be solo sessions. So the types of sessions and the types of services are, vary potentially dramatically, which is also very interesting about it.
And to be clear on like what is allowed, it's supported adult use. We don't want to say it's medical or anything like that yet, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a very key feature of it. So, and to me personally, like this was like one of the great things about it. It's a non, and of course, when you're drafting a ballot measure, you could have done this any number of different ways. But the non-medical way, at least that element of it, means that a client, you have to be 21 years of age by the statute, but the client doesn't have to be diagnosed or have any preconditions or anything like that. So anyone can do it for any reason, which one might say could be characterized as recreational if you wanted to, although the folks don't usually run around saying that. But you don't need a reason necessarily to do it. Now, of course, there are folks who have really serious reasons why they might want to use it, but that's not a requirement. And then on the other side of the coin, the facilitators themselves don't need to be licensed professionals other than a licensed facilitator. So they have to take a course and graduate their course and pass a test, and then they are a licensed facilitator. But that is a new profession that has been invented by this measure, and you don't need to be a physician or a psychologist or a psychotherapist or anything like that. Although some of those folks are becoming licensed facilitators, but there are a lot of folks who are also just the statute just requires you to have a high school degree. So folks who just, 21 years old, theoretically, pass the course, you can become a facilitator.
That's wild. What kind of businesses are you seeing come into the space, and like maybe what's a good kind of candidate for coming into Oregon to try to do business there?
I mean, people have to be ready to be highly regulated. So, this is not, necessarily an easy area to navigate in Oregon. There are a lot of rules and regulations. The businesses that we represent, like I mentioned earlier, are primarily service centers. We have, facilitators who need representation and manufacturers. But, for the most part, this is not like a sort of ketamine clinic model. It's not really necessarily even, I think, a model where you're going to see a lot of people, go to a service center like multiple times in a week or multiple times in a month. And so I think, one thing I'm hearing from a lot of our clients is like, there's a lot of people who are coming from out of state to access these services. And a lot of them are coming, with all this research and understanding of, the mental health benefits and modalities that could be served through consuming psilocybin. And so I think, there's going to be a variety of businesses in Oregon. At least we hope so. That would be the most, healthy and sustainable sort of model that we could see. And that would include, people who are a little bit more geared towards serving people with, mental health illnesses or people who aren't just seeking recreational use. They're looking for something to help them. And then, there might be destination resorts, people coming from, all over the country, all over the world to like access retreats like they do in Jamaica or the Netherlands. So, I think it's not for everyone. You just have to be ready to kind of commit yourself to the process. And I think commit to being part of something that's very new and in its infancy and probably, going to be subject to changing and morphing over many years.
I think these are very brave industry participants on the first movers here. In cannabis, but I think the business element of it is really important. I mean, to get into this thing and to survive it takes a lot of organizational skills. The paperwork here is rather dramatic. I mean, for cannabis, like, you didn't enter into agreements with your customers. They walked through the door, you checked their ID, you sold them a product, and they walked out the door. Here, just the intake process, it's a little overwhelming, and you have to, if you're going to run a competitive, profitable business and not get sued when there's not much insurance floating around right now, like, you have to be organized and you have to sort of go into it with that sort of, which is, I think in the cannabis days, in the early cannabis days, in Oregon, we had so many the medical marijuana industry was so large that everyone just got an adult use license. Thousands of applications went through. No one gave much thought to competition or the future. It was just something you did. And, it's been a tough ride 8 years later for the cannabis industry. There's just too many folks involved. At some point, you would figure just folks would stop entering the market because it's not a profitable market. And it's hard to stay in business. I mean, it's very cutthroat, margins are thin and all that stuff. So here, I think
some people love that kind of thing, I guess.
Well, yeah, but it's no longer like a fun, it's not a fun hobby anymore. It's like a real competitive business. It's a career, and you can make money at it, but you got to know what you're doing. I just wouldn't enter some industry I know nothing about and think I can run it. Now, so the service centers, I think, are, the facilitators, that's just personal services, right? So that just, I'm a lawyer, prefer personal services, psychologist, massage therapist, whoever. You're just trying to get clients, and I think those folks will figure out a way to just survive. Service centers right now are in the driver's seat because there's just not that many of them. And the waiting lists are long, we hear, and everybody's doing pretty well, which is a really good sign. And there haven't been any disaster stories. So I think it's all rolling out kind of methodically. And the folks who are getting into it, are getting into it not because there's nothing better to do and it's just sort of perpetual motion from what they've been doing. They're getting into it in a more thought through way, which I think behooves everybody. So I like folks who, I mean, it's our job to educate folks legally and to advise them, but we can't, we're not business folks, and we try not to give business advice, but sometimes, you sit there like, I don't know, like this.
Have you thought this one through?
Yeah. And so we're very, very hesitant to like say, oh yeah, we don't think you're ready for business. Like we don't do that. Or a lot of folks ask us, what do you think I want to enter the Oregon market. Should I do this or should I do that? I'm like, we can't, I'm not going to point, I could tell you what I'm seeing, but I'm not going to be your business advisor. But I think, having said that, I think service, I'll make a general statement. I think service centers, there's a good opportunity there because I think that's where money can be made because it can be such an event-filled thing that goes beyond psilocybin. I think you can have places that just offer other stuff. And microdosing is a good example where some folks just want to couple that with other wellness activities or other activities in general. And you could literally do anything. We have one client who they're on a golf resort. They want to do like microdose golfing. You could do microdose yoga. You could come up with anything you want. And wellness activities are very broad, right? So psilocybin, you could do a whole bunch of other activities that are totally federally legal and make it part of a wellness package. So all that stuff is, I think, endless possibilities, which is really means there's no you can only have so many cannabis retail stores down the corner. I mean, you can only have so many. But here I think you could come up with, it's more of a participatory thing, which I think maybe just, I don't know, there's more possibilities and there's more room for new ideas.
And Oregon does have a lot of space. So we've been pretty active in the training side, working with OHA and HECC to pull our training program through. We've taken our time. We wanted other people to be the first movers because it's nice of them to do that for us. And then, so that's a licensed thing. Service centers are licensed. What else is available as like a licensed business under this framework?
So manufacturers get licensed by the OHA. They grow psilocybin, manufacture psilocybin into, products and package them, label them, and sell them to the service centers. And then licensed service centers turn around and sell that product to the client. And then there's the licensed facilitators, of course. And so your training program would be training those facilitators, 160 total hours. And, they apply to the OHA and get licensed, hopefully, if they pass their exam. And then they provide the sessions and services to the clients who consume the psilocybin at the service center. So like Dave said, the prep, admin, and integration sessions. And then, of course, there's the testing labs that test the products that the manufacturers sell to the service centers. So 4 total license types.
Yeah, and I think the manufacturers, I don't really know how many manufacturers there could be, because you're only selling to the service center. So it depends on the demand. The demand of the clients will, affect how many service centers there will be, and how many service centers there will be will affect the demand on the manufacturers. So that remains to be seen. But it seems that, again, at the outset, that the service centers seems to be, those who have started, they seem to be doing okay with long waiting lists, which bodes well. I mean, if we had a dozen service centers open and nobody was booking any clients because they were all in the underground and nobody was coming because it was too expensive, that would not be a good start. But, so far so good.
That's great. And from what I understand, it's only oral administration of these products. What kind of products are we seeing? Is it just dried mushrooms? Are we seeing chocolate, or what else? What kind of things are being sold?
I think all of the above. So dried mushrooms, chocolates, gummies. And I mean, I think, one thing Dave and I have discussed is manufacturers probably want like a unique product to set themselves apart. I mean, if all the products in the market are just homogenous, there's really nothing that, might cause a service center to go with, this manufacturer versus this manufacturer. So I think we might see kind of a unique array of products. And that makes sense because, some clients might want to consume a chocolate. Some might enjoy the kind of very traditional form of consuming the whole mushroom. And so and that's totally understandable. And then others might want like a gummy, or, they might want something that's a little bit more appealing and appetizing and tastes better and gives them an overall better experience.
There's definitely some folks who would be interested. On the other hand, I think there's some folks who, if they were thinking about participating and having a session, that the product, it may not be the driving force. I mean, it probably wouldn't be, it'd probably be fairly far down a list, maybe. Like if I'm gonna participate in a session, my first questions are like, where is this happening? What does the place look like? What kind of room am I going to be in? Is it going to be outdoor? That would play a large role. And then, whether I'm in a group session or not, and then who my facilitators are, like the people involved, like that's the main experience. And the consumption part is, obviously important, but that'll be over in about, 60 seconds. And so unless there's some ceremonial thing to it, but it may not be like a driving force. And so I think some manufacturers will try to distinguish themselves, and some service centers will try to say, hey, we've got this product. But at the end of the day, I don't know if anyone's going to go to a service center solely because they have product X and not product Y. So it's a little bit of a different thing from a cannabis dispensary, where, by now a lot of folks have their favorite products. They want to try this. It's a product-driven thing. Here, it's more of experience, and so there's more factors involved than just the product.
Right. I think my only experience with cannabis at like a nice venue is in like West Hollywood at like Woody Harrelson's Smoke Lounge, and that was super interesting. But it was, it's like the cannabis brands weren't the draw. It was the venue and the activities there. It was the draw. And I think you're spot on. Like how could like Wana brand mushrooms, if that was the thing, like be the draw?
Yeah.
Can't.
Although I can imagine, some people who have never experienced psilocybin and, they're like, oh, I've heard it tastes like cardboard, and like you want to like just throw it up immediately after consuming it. Like I could see them, being like, well, take me to a service center where there's like an edible of some sort.
I think like type of product for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some folks who, just like, cannabis growers have different philosophies on, indoor, outdoor, like all kinds of stuff that a discerning, customer may or may not be interested in. And so I think that some facilitators, just like service centers can have any type of look and feel they want, facilitators can have their own style of facilitation, which could range from anything, indigenous, shamanistic, or not, or health oriented or something. So you could also maybe, in the ceremony part of it, could be meaningful to folks, or maybe not. It's like, here, take a capsule, and so it sort of depends on a lot of things. But I think that's interesting because it allows the facilitators to kind of mold their own way of doing things, and the service centers to mold their way of doing things, and you mix them all together, and every experience might be unique.
I'm curious to talk about the law a little bit. So it's not too often I get to sit down with two attorneys. Sit down with one lawyer, plenty. So the biggest thing that was curious to me was, we have the federal protections, kind of. It was a Cole memorandum for cannabis. So we have that. Like, what's our status with the feds? Like, I know it's a really bad look if the feds came in here on this. Like, honestly, I think the feds generally aren't polling super well with our scene, at least. But like, how does Oregon state law interact with federal law as it goes to like the cannabis business or
Dave
mushroom
loves
business?
talking about the Cole memo and federal illegality, so I'm going to pass the mic to him.
Amazing.
Oh, I love the Cole memo, but it no longer exists, so I fondly recall
That's right,
it.
they kind of withdrew it, right?
Yeah, Jeff Sessions did, but as a practical matter, it's the same thing. So you're right, there's no equivalent for psilocybin. Oregon's the first state to go. there's been no federal pronouncement one way or the other, no federal guidance, and we didn't expect there to be, and we don't expect there to be for a while, on the thinking that, the feds are not going to give us a green light because it's too premature. Like they don't want to like set a precedent or anything. I mean, they didn't give the real Cole memo until 2013, which was like 15 years after California's first medical law, and then after Washington and Colorado passed their adult use measure in 2012. It still took them another practically a year to come up with the Cole memo. And there were Cole memo precursors that sort of gave some guidance. But this is brand spanking new. And so we suspect the feds aren't going to do anything. They're going to sit back and take a wait and see attitude. And Oregon, if Oregon goes fine and there's no really bad stuff that happens, Colorado will come online in 2025. If things go, at least the regulatory part of it, if things go well there, I think they'll just sort of sit back and maybe one day there'll be some sort of memo on this stuff, or maybe they will come crashing in because there's too many bad news stories that are happening. But so far, nothing like that. And we don't, so nobody's holding their breath. And clients ask about this, and sometimes clients or investors in a early stage conversation will get the picture and they'll be like, oh, thanks for telling me that. Like, I'm going to wait and see. And so, they'll kind of not jump in, but other folks like, no, the likelihood of everyone getting arrested and going to jail overnight is pretty slim. I mean, but folks are investing a lot of money and doing a lot of, if it gets shut down, it'd be a really bad thing. But I think you just push everybody to the underground more than they are already. So I think any smart person would realize that. So we'll see. We're all fingers are crossed that it's going to work out okay. And the feds will be kind of a non-issue. And so, but the folks who have committed to doing this, like once you cross that threshold, like nobody gives it a second thought. It's like, okay, now let's figure out all this other stuff we have to do for you.
And the feds for sure want some of those tax dollars, right? And they're getting it. How does taxation work in this whole frame? Like if we're talking like federal taxes for a business.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a little primer on 280E. So there's a tax code in the Internal Revenue Code, 280E, Section 280E, that says that any trade or business that's trafficking in a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 controlled substance can't take like standard business deductions. And there's an exception for cost of goods sold. And here the goods are like negligible. It's just the product, right? And so then the product isn't all that expensive. The services are expensive. And so the impact to service centers and facilitators is that, presumably they're going to get hit hard by 280E. That said, there are a lot of creative business structures that can be implemented to try to mitigate 280E. And we often work with, CPAs that our clients have hired to, figure out a path forward and, take defensible and reasonable tax positions that help our clients. So for instance, facilitators in Oregon can't touch the product and they don't sell the product. The service center sells the product, which is helpful. Like they're just providing the services to the client. And so a lot of, facilitators are presumably going to take a tax position that they're not trafficking. They're not subject to 280E. They're not touching the product. They're not selling it.
Good.
And yeah. And so that's helpful for facilitators. But that said, we don't actually know what the IRS is going to do. And so the thing that we often do for people is form corporations to help insulate them from tax liability, personal tax liability, in case the IRS came back in and started rearranging things and there was a larger than anticipated tax bill.
The upside for psilocybin, I think, at least compared to cannabis. I mean, cannabis, you were stuck with 280E and you couldn't really take a position you weren't trafficking. So you were stuck with it and you had to figure out how to maximize your cost. There was stuff you could do. CPAs and lawyers could get together and kind of do certain things. But here, because cannabis never had a services element to it, here there are ways to structure things. We think we've, come up with a one or two ways where you're really minimizing it. Like you're taking the position you're not trafficking in the first place, or your trafficking is very limited. And we think there's there's defensible positions there, like Kaci said. So I think 280 could have a less drastic effect on psilocybin than it did on cannabis, which is good. I think it's good.
Important for a lot of reasons.
There's no guarantees there. And of course, all these companies still have to file tax returns. I mean, they still have to pay their taxes. It's just 280 is going to dictate how much of your expenses you can essentially deduct or not. And you want to deduct all your expenses because then you lowers your gains, your taxable income. So, but I think we're in a good place. I think we figured out kind of the best way or two to do it, and I think that's sort of driving the business models, which is I mentioned kind of the room rental way to do things. It's good from a tax perspective, and it's good from a liability perspective. So that's the kind of stuff we're sort of helping folks with on the front end. And then the other thing that's really new, well, not new to us, but unlike cannabis, we're drafting a lot of contracts for the clients themselves to sign, like the consumers, right? So, dispensaries never had contracts with their customers. They check their ID and they walk out the door. Here, it's a more, they're not patients, but it's like having a client. Like when our law firm engages a client engages us, we have an engagement letter. It's a contract, and here's the terms and conditions. And so it's that kind of thing with a client, just like a psychologist would have their terms and conditions for their patients. So we've come up with, these templates that I think are really helpful for service centers, for facilitators. And the clients are going to sign these waivers and releases of liability, and all this terrible stuff could happen, and initial here and initial here and initial here. But it's all to protect everybody, and it's all to set everybody's expectations and keep, going into it, recognizing that, something, it may work out great for you. It may be a bad experience. It may be a big nothing. You may like, what was all that about? But as a service provider, I think it's always key to sort of like set your client's expectations so that, it could go this way, it could go this way, which benefits everybody. If you go into things with wrong expectations, you're more liable to be disappointed. So it's almost just like informed consent, or just limited expectations. You could hit a home run. You could strike out. It could be nothing. I don't know. But we, for our legal work, like going through those sort of templates we drafted, all the cannabis work was business to business negotiated agreements. These are consumer facing templates that people are just going to sign, which is what for us was a little bit of a new thing.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's fun. I do hope the tax burden is much less. Yeah, let's see. Right?
I think it will be.
Yeah. Cool. Any kind of like closing things, anything you want to jump into before we sort of wrap here?
I mean, I think I have a lot of hope for the Oregon program. I think there's a lot of kind of negative talk around Oregon's program or misconceptions. And I think some are valid, but overall, I think that things are going to trend in a positive direction. And I think as the program matures, we're going to see a real healthy, like sustainable program in Oregon. And so I'm excited about the future, and I really enjoy all of our clients that we work with. Everyone seems to be in it for great reasons. And I think that's awesome, as an attorney to be able to represent businesses who are doing something right in the world. So those are my parting thoughts.
Yeah, I'm optimistic too. We had so many cannabis clients, and it was sad to see a lot of them just like fall by the wayside. And they just, it wasn't for them, or for some of them, it just got too overwhelming, or they weren't turning a profit, and it wasn't fun anymore, and they moved on. And, that's just, you could say that's a natural evolution of a new industry, and there's consolidation that would normally happen, and there's nothing to be done about it. But you hope for a sustainable ecosystem. And so I'm really hoping that that this is a new industry that can, years from now just be sustainable, be profitable for folks. And so I want folks to stay in business. Like I don't want folks to, that's why I want folks to go in with good business plans, good legal advice, good CPA advice, good business advice, know what they're doing, play defense a little bit, not get sued. That's a big one. Get insurance when it's available, and set a good example for other states. And I think if it proliferates like cannabis does, that's a great, great thing for the country. And it will, I think it will. And so every state will do things a little differently. There's always things that can be approved under any system, but it's all an evolution. So we're at the beginning stages. We just have to keep going and surviving. And so I hope that the clients that are these early movers, they're not just early movers who get burned out and pushed aside 2 years from now. I hope they stick around for businesses. I mean, naturally some folks at some point want to sell. Hey, we built this big thing. It's successful. I want an exit strategy and leave. That people move on. But I think I like folks to move on because they want to move on, not because they're, things are going awful and they have to bail because things didn't go as planned. So that's the hope. And we'll do our best as attorneys to see, hopefully help our clients get there.
Thanks. Well, Dave and Kaci, thank you so much. Where can people find your law firm online?
emergelawgroup.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. And I really hope we can do it again. Yeah, this is fun.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And there you have it, everybody. Dave and Kaci from Emerge Law Group. Hope you enjoyed that one, learned something, and now know how to be a little bit safer if you're going to be doing business in Oregon. There's one headline I missed in that intro. New York Times headline here, breathing their way to an altered state. Subtitle, as psychedelics move from the underground to mainstream medicine, clinicians aspiring to work in the field are inducing altered states with deep breathing. I wonder what that's about. Writer here is Ernesto Londono, reporting from San Francisco. So just really what I love is that it's including a lot of stuff about the psychedelic history, what's happening right now in psychedelics, and then also profile Stan Grof, who I hope all of you know. A big portion of what we do here is based on the work of Dr. Stanislav Grof. He's 92 years old. He was recently on our show. He wrote this book, LSD Psychotherapy, in 1980. He was doing LSD psychotherapy very early. I think, it's as early as just about anybody, and really fully fleshed out this whole psychedelic psychotherapy thing. So we're just really happy to see Stan's name in the New York Times. I'm happy to see a different angle. And for what it's worth, we at Psychedelics Today like to say it's all psychedelic. Like the psychedelic experiences from holotropic breathwork are just as psychedelic as other experiences. So it can be as intense as anything else, and it's all the same. It's all the psyche. So I think that's the important part. You're dealing with the same thing, just the experiences are instantiated through different means. Same way like phenethylamine and a tryptamine might have different things. Same with breathwork, but it's all working on the psyche. All right, I think that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. And please do share with friends or family, and we will see you on the next episode. This is Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today. Until next time, bye-bye.